Hello and welcome back to Past the Pitch. I'm Anna Frazzetto, and today I'm kicking off a six-part series with Kelly Boykin, CEO of Growth Curve. So, super excited about being able to have this conversation. We're going to be talking about two growth paths in staffing: MSP enterprise programs, and also talk about SOW projects and consulting. So, we get these questions asked constantly. Should we go deeper in MSP and enterprise, or should we diversify into SOW and consulting? So, in this series, what we're hoping to do is that we're going to be able to break it down: what works, what breaks, what you need behind the scenes to do it well. So, today we're starting off with the foundation. We'll define both lanes, talk about the two operating systems, and help you decide what to prioritize first. So, first of all, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I feel honored to be here and famous now that I'm on your podcast.
That's great. That's great. Okay, let me start off with asking you a question. When firms say we want growth, what are they usually reacting to right now?
Yeah, and who isn't saying that they want growth right now? I see this a lot with particularly with founder-led firms. Maybe they have had one or two really large accounts over the last few years that have sustained the business. And maybe those accounts are in decline. Of course, let's face it, the last couple of years has been rough. So, nobody panics at first. The team seems to be busy. Leadership eventually looks up and they realize, it's not working as well as it used to. Numbers are dropping, things don't work the way that they did. And this is usually a light bulb moment. The teams are good, the relationships seem real, but those people and processes and technologies and strategies that got them from, let's say, 5 to 10 million or 30 to 40 million are not getting them to that next stage. So I think when they say we want growth, what they're saying is we've outgrown how we are operating and what we need to do to get to the next level.
That is such a great point because a lot of organizations I find they wind up like doubling down on doing things exactly the same way like they have been doing it and then get frustrated. Well, like, why aren't you doing the 100 calls a day? Because the world has changed. That doesn't work anymore. You need to kind of pivot that mindset. So I appreciate that. That's great insight.
I hear that so often. I know you do too. What we did 30 years ago was X, and that just is not going to get us there anymore. Well, and how about you? You know what a lot of firms are saying now: we want SOW. Maybe they've dabbled in it. Maybe they've done a lot of it. And I don't think they're always just talking about the right way of doing SOW with scope and delivery. I think what they're saying is we want higher margin business or more control. But when a firm says that to you, we want SOW. What do they actually mean?
So it's interesting because, SOW, everybody thinks, "Oh, yeah, statement of work. I can definitely do statement of work. All I have to do is wrap these, 5 people that are providing this service under one statement of work, and therefore I'm doing SOW." But then what happens is you have procurement and other members of the organization that say, "Hang on a second, you're really not providing SOW. All you've done is staffing with a bow. You've wrapped a contract around 5 people and you're trying to get around MSPs or you're trying to get around our internal process." So I think the common error with SOW and what companies underestimate is the fact that it's not a flip of a switch. I always focus on people, process, and technology. And you need to look at, first of all, do the same people that provide you with that transactional sales interaction daily, can they move into more of a consultative sales approach, which is required for SOW? Secondly, do you have the process internally to be able to scope and size truly an SOW so that you can deliver it? And last but not least, do you have the right tools to be able to measure the success of you doing that SOW? The tools are going to require your back office is going to change because your billing process is going to change. And also the tools to properly scope and size the opportunity is also change. Your price models are going to change, right? Because again, it's not that flip of a switch. So I think there's so much that happens. And that's why you hear often that companies fail at SOW because they feel that they can just jump right in and then they realize this is not working. So then they chalk it up to SOW is too hard versus really self-reflecting on what they can do differently internally.
And I love it. SOW is too hard and MSP is too hard. It's all hard. This is staffing. None of it's easy, right?
Exactly. So, Kelly, let me ask you about MSP and when MSP revenue is flat, right? So, this happens a lot. I've experienced it myself where, like, we're so excited about being part of this MSP, and then it just feels like the account just kind of like withers away or it stays flat, always at the same level. Where is the most common leakage?
Yeah, for me, what I see are a couple things. The first area that really allows that leakage to happen is, I believe, mindset. And then the second is just loose operations, right? So, on the mindset side, a lot of firms treat MSPs like the enemy instead of a channel to be leveraged. And don't get me wrong, it's not easy and it is different. But we'll hear things like, there's no relationships with MSPs, or it's just a relationship with the VMS or an inbox. Once your teams believe that, they stop showing up. So the communication drops because they think there doesn't need to be any or it doesn't matter. Trust erodes and the MSP work gets quietly deprioritized. And I say quietly, that's almost always how it happens is, look, if I'm a recruiter and I have direct business and MSP business on my desk, I'm absolutely going to work the direct business first, if I'm allowed to do that. So that's the first thing that I see is that mindset is not translated from the top to the bottom, that this is important. And then the operational leaks kick in, right? So the MSP work, because it's being treated as secondary and it's being treated like regular staffing, your retail SMB business, even though speed and follow up matter here more than anywhere else, the submittals get slower, the quality slips, no one's really watching what's happening with this business. And, what happens is when firms start to lose this business, they lose it before they actually lose the account, and we'll talk about this, I think, a little bit later. The scorecard really just makes it official. Once your scorecard talks about, those diminished operations, it's late in the game. It's been happening for a little while, so that MSP business doesn't disappear overnight. I found it just starts to leak out very slowly throughout the business through silence and disengagement.
Right. Well, I think, Kelly, you hit on what I would say like two golden nuggets in the sense of you talk about trust and you also talk about communication. Trust, in particular for me on the SOW side, that's one of the key ingredients that you have to have from the salesperson is that that salesperson is viewed as that trusted advisor so that as they're building different platforms or different programs that they wanna work with you because they trust you as a supplier and a vendor and having that communication side. So I could see how that could easily happen on the MSP side also.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And look, let's face it, our teams are probably leaner than ever, and so it's gonna give somewhere unless we start at the top and shift those priorities and what we want to share with folks that's important. So, kind of back to you. When companies are looking at either starting SOW or doing things that are gonna help them grow. I see a lot of firms trying to do a lot of things at once, and that can be really tricky. They want the growth, so they start layering lots of different solutions before really stabilizing what they have. So, if you can't do everything at once, and we can't usually, what actually needs to come first?
And that's a great question because that's part of the challenge. I think, automatically, um, companies are like, "I'm all in. I'm gonna do SOW. I'm all in. This is everything that, we've been wanting to do." But I try to keep it simple, right? Keep it simple where and I break it into the 3 categories that I have mentioned earlier: people, process, and technology. So I look at first at the work that you're currently providing. Is there anything in there that has the semblance of being an SOW? So, for example, if you're providing QA testers to an organization, well, is there any way that these QA testers could be more of a scope of work where the client, it's not staffing with a bow, but that you can introduce some kind of value around that. But then that becomes more of a gradual change as opposed to now saying you provide SOW across the entire full software development life cycle. That's a horse of a different color. You can't do that. So that's what I would say is like keep it simple and break it down into the different buckets and see what is feasible to slowly transition, a phased approach into getting into the SOW space.
And, if they are making those decisions or looking at that, what is one early warning sign that you may not be ready for that SOW move yet?
Well, I would say looking at the staff, if you have a sales team that is 100% focused on that staff augmentation mentality, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I think it's the same way as we talk about hunters and farmers, right? There's different skill sets. It's the same thing transactional versus consultative selling. So if I have a team of 5 salespeople and I realize that all 5 are transactional salespeople, that's a telltale sign that you're not ready for SOW. And then it's up to you to figure out from an investment perspective, do you want your next salesperson to be more of a solution salesperson? And then you have to look at how does this person interact with the transactional salespeople so that there is a very friendly co-opetition, right? Where they're cooperating with each other and there's incentives that match. But I would say start with the people, start with the people first.
Makes sense.
All right, so Kelly, let me ask a quick question about MSPs. What's one early warning sign you see that the MSP is being completely mismanaged?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 because I'm an overachiever. Um, I think the first is when the scorecards surprise leadership. When you get a scorecard or any sort of feedback from the program to the staffing firm and leadership is surprised, that's a sign that you're not in alignment. If the MSP knows your performance better than you do, then that's a problem. And the second thing is listening to that staff and hearing those phrases like what I alluded to earlier. This business is just hard. We can't be successful with this. When you start to hear that negative language, you're doing something wrong when it comes to having a defined strategy, communicating that from the top down and reinforcing those behaviors.
No, that's interesting. And would you say that there's any myth about MSPs that you would like to kill right now as we're having this conversation?
Yeah, yeah. And I'll say this a few times. I am not for or against staffing firms working with MSPs, by the way. Not every staffing firm should. But a couple things that I hear really commonly are this. Number one, the MSPs are bad. It's their fault. They're just out to reduce our pricing. They're the ones that are restricting our access to hiring managers. And neither of those are usually the case. Usually, all of those decisions are made by the client. And the second myth is that you can just work around them and it will all work out well, and you probably come across this as you're working with companies on that SOW business. If it's true contingent labor, time, and materials, it's hard to work around it for long without it being found out. So both of these things happen because that discipline, that operating discipline that it takes to really be successful in the MSP space is difficult. And those firms that stop blaming the partner, blaming the MSP, and start really mastering it are the ones that are going to be successful.
Right. No, I agree. I agree. I would say if I was to answer as far as myths on the SOW side of things, to your point, I think it's thinking it's a flip of a switch. Right? It's
Mm.
not. There's work involved. There's also taking a look at what investments you wanna make into SOW, because if you think about it, SOW is another product and service offering, right? So it is not under the same umbrella of what you're doing staff aug-wise. So you need to kind of figure that out. So I would say it's not a flip of a switch. It's definitely doable, and I'm with you. I don't necessarily, insist that all companies need to go to SOW. It's gotta fit within their world, and it's gotta fit, within what they're trying to do.
Yeah,
Well, I have
agreed.
to say I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation here in our first episode. Bottom line, what we're saying is that MSPs at SOW can both be growth engines, but they require different motions, different metrics, different muscles. So I'm excited because at the next episode, we get to go deep on the SOW side of things. We're going to talk about delivery, infrastructure, and recruiter impact. So if you're listening and thinking we are stuck, please comment MSP or SOW and tell us what's not working for you. Is it pipeline? Is it delivery? Is it pricing? Or is it expansion? So thank you so much.